You wake up on a cold stone floor, no windows, just the suffocating smell of sweat, fear, and olive oil. The rough walls press against your bare skin as distant laughter echoes from the main house. Not the kind of laughter that sparks joy, no. This is the kind that twists your stomach, the kind you never forget. Your body aches from last night. Dark bruises bloom like strange, ugly flowers along your ribs. The iron shackle around your ankle bites into broken skin, crusted with blood that cracks every time you move. Then, footsteps. Heavy sandals scraping against marble. You know that sound. The overseer. Preparing you for what they call service. Your hands tremble as you reach for the thin, worn-out tunic tossed in the corner. You're what? 15? 16? You've lost count. Time stops meaning anything when you are considered someone's property. The door groans open. Sunlight slices through the darkness, forcing you to shield your eyes. His silhouette blocks the doorway. A mountain of muscle, scars carving maps of cruelty into his face. Get yourself cleaned up, he growls, tossing a wet cloth at your feet. The master has guests tonight, important ones, and you. His eyes scan you like inspecting livestock. We'll make sure they're entertained. Your throat tightens. You know exactly what that means. You knew from the first night they dragged you out of your village, kicking and screaming, after telling your parents their debts were paid. Paid in the only currency they had left. This is the side of history they never teach you. Not in classrooms, not in textbooks, not in documentaries wrapped in marble columns and words like democracy and philosophy. Beneath it all, there was a machine that consumed the vulnerable. A system designed to strip the humanity from the powerless. Long before anyone ever etched a statue of a thinker or held a grand debate in the agora. If stories like this open your eyes to the hidden truths of our past, hit that like button, subscribe for more, and drop a comment below telling me where you're listening from. I love seeing how curiosity connects all of us, across time and continents. Because here's the brutal reality behind those ancient ruins tourists snap photos of today. Maybe your family owed money to a wealthy landowner. Maybe war swept through your village, just one of the countless wars that chewed up the Greek world for generations. Or maybe you were simply born beautiful in a society where beauty was a commodity to be auctioned. Imagine this. A tiny farming village tucked between hills of scraggly olive trees. Mud brick homes with thatched roofs, families sleeping shoulder to shoulder on dirt floors for warmth. Barefoot kids laughing, chasing each other between goats and chickens, unaware how close their lives teeter on the edge. Then, disaster, a drought, relentless, week after week under a sun that feels like it's trying to burn the earth itself. Crops shrivel, the wheat turns to dust in your hands, the wells, lifelines for generations, start running dry. And when there's no harvest, there's no payment. But debt doesn't care. The collectors arrive, and they aren't interested in promises or excuses or next season's crops. They want payment. Now. And when the fields are empty, they turn their gaze to your family's last remaining asset. You. This wasn't rare. This was normal, hidden in plain sight behind the marble myths of ancient greatness. So the next time someone tells you about the glory of the ancient world, remember the voices they left out. First, they sold the goats, then the sheep. Livestock, the only real wealth a family like yours ever had. Then came the jewelry, tiny heirlooms passed down for generations, now just metal and stones traded for survival. But when nothing else was left, that's when the gaze shifted. From the horizon to the children, the traders arrived like vultures sensing the scent of desperation. They set up in the center of the village, coiled chains like iron serpents, ledgers thick with names and prices. They weren't here for quick deals. No, they offered contracts. 20 years, paid up front. Enough silver maybe to feed a family through the winter. To a starving parent, it almost sounded reasonable, almost merciful. But you're 12. You don't understand the math of despair. You only understand the way your father avoids looking at you as he haggles over your price. How your mother turns her face away as the trader checks your teeth like inspecting a mule. Rough hands prod your arms, squeeze your shoulders, assess the shape of your back. You hear words like promising build, good lineage, suited for housework. Words that mean nothing yet, not yet. You watch as the trader counts the silver, coins flashing in the sunlight. Each coin a year of your life. Your father's hands tremble as he accepts them, but he still accepts. Your mother sobs, but doesn't stop the deal. They tell you it's temporary, that you'll earn money, return home, buy land, maybe even start a family of your own. They swear you'll be treated well, that you'll learn valuable skills, that this is an opportunity. Lies, honeyed words from broken mouths, sweet and poisonous. The journey to the city, a nightmare. Collars and chains, blisters on your feet. You're one link in a long, rattling line of boys, shackled together by iron and hopelessness. The older ones don't talk. They've learned that hope is just another word for future disappointment. The younger ones cry, whisper for their mothers, until their voices vanish, or until the overseers beat the sound out of them. You march past landscapes that in another life might have been beautiful. Hills draped in olive trees, coastal roads where the sea glitters like scattered diamonds, mountain passes where eagles soar overhead, but you don't see any of it. Your world has shrunk to the length of chain between your neck and the boy in front of you, to the rhythm of feet scraping against stone, to the growing certainty that you will never, ever see home again. At night, they drive metal stakes into the ground, chain you there like cattle. You lie on your side, listening to the muffled sobs of others, feeling the cold, crushing weight of iron around your neck, like a cursed necklace you'll never take off. Sometimes, visitors come, men with soft hands, sharp eyes, and smiles as fake as polished marble. They walk between you like farmers inspecting livestock, pulling, prodding, checking for illness, testing for injuries, estimating how many years they can squeeze out of you before your body breaks. And you learn something terrible. Not all buyers are the same. The plantation owners, they look for muscle, endurance, boys who can work the fields from dawn till dusk without collapsing. The household buyers, they want something else. Obedience, intelligence, a certain fragility. Enough to show you won't fight back, but strong enough to scrub, clean, serve. But then, there's the third kind. The kind you learn to dread. These men don't wear work boots or smell like sweat. No, they arrive in fine robes, their fingers drip with gold rings, perfume clings to them like a mask, sweet wine on their breath. Their words are smooth, their smiles colder than steel. When they arrive, everyone goes quiet, even the overseers, because everyone knows these men aren't here for workers, they're here for something else entirely. When they look at you, it lingers, not like curiosity, not like concern, but like calculation, a cold clinical assessment. They aren't looking for strength, not this time. They're searching for something else entirely. A dangerous combination of youth and beauty. The slave market in Athens isn't just a place. It's a full-blown assault on every sense you have. The noise hits first. Hundreds of voices haggling, shouting, begging, ordering. Then the smell. Sweat, fear, urine, and something else. Something sour and metallic that twists your stomach into knots. Then you see it. Now you understand why the older slaves whispered, "Don't look up." Rows of human bodies displayed like inventory. Children barely old enough to walk, clutching their mother's hands, wide-eyed, trembling. Elderly men, backs bent, spirits hollow, standing there, their worth now reduced to whatever fragments of strength remain in their aging muscles. And everywhere, the buyers, circling, watching, pointing, whispering, like sharks in shallow water. Before they put you on the block, they scrub you down, oil your skin, not for kindness, but for profit. Clean sells better. The oil makes your skin glow under the sun, highlights every muscle you've built just trying to survive the journey here. Someone decided you were too pretty for the fields. No, you've been sorted into a different category, the kind destined for life inside the house. The auctioneer's voice booms over the crowd, listing off your specs like you're a prized animal. Age, origin, physical condition. He makes note of your pleasant appearance, your gentle temperament, words designed to attract a specific type of buyer. Men lean forward, suddenly more interested. Bids start low, but not for long. Hands shoot up, voices rise, silver flashes, the price climbs fast. You stand there, frozen, trying to disappear into yourself as strangers touch you. One forces your mouth open to check your teeth. Another squeezes your arms. A third runs his fingers through your hair, commenting on its texture, its color. You're not a person anymore. You're an asset, a commodity, a number. The highest bidder? A man named Lysander. Not that you know his name yet. All you see is the smile. That cold, satisfied smile as he counts the silver. His eyes had already claimed you long before the deal was done. Lysander is well-fed, middle-aged. His hands are soft. Too soft for a man who's ever done a day of real work. His robe is silk, dyed deep purple. A color that screams wealth, power, untouchable status. And the way he looks at you triggers every instinct to run. But the iron around your ankles says otherwise. Lysander owns a sprawling estate in the wealthiest district of Athens. A mansion so massive it dwarfs your entire village. Marble pillars tower above mosaics depicting gods, heroes, and battles. Servants scurry through grand halls, balancing trays of wine, fruit, and roasted meats. And that's when you notice something. Most of them are young men. Different faces, same look, a haunted look, a quiet desperation, a silent surrender. You realize it's the universal face of captivity. Your overseer introduces himself, Demetrius. Once he was where you are now, bought young, sold, broken, trained, and eventually, he clawed his way up, not through mercy or kindness, but through razor-sharp intelligence and absolute cruelty. Now, he runs the household like a machine, iron discipline, zero tolerance. He knows exactly how to bend spirits without breaking the body, and as his eyes meet yours, you understand something terrifying. This is your new reality. Welcome to the life you never chose. Demetrius walks you through the mansion like a warden introducing a prison. His voice is flat, practiced. You'll be fed twice a day, he says. Barley porridge in the morning, bread and olives at night. Clean clothes, once a week. A bath, only when ordered. You eat when told, sleep when told, speak only when spoken to. And never, ever, look a free man in the eyes. Refuse a command, any command, and you'll learn quickly what regret feels like. Then comes the part that freezes the blood in your veins. You're here to serve, he says, the master and his guests, in whatever way they require. His lips curl into something between a smile and a warning. Pouring wine, cleaning rooms, serving meals, or offering entertainment. The details, he chuckles, will become clear with time. Some try to resist, he continues, casually adjusting the keys on his belt. But resistance only leads to pain. Compliance. Well, compliance comes with perks. Better food, a warmer bed, maybe even a few personal belongings. He leads you down a narrow staircase into the belly of the house, the slave quarters. Stone walls, thick, designed to muffle sound. You'll soon learn why. Tiny cells line the hallway, each no bigger than a closet, a straw mattress, a thin blanket, a wooden bucket in the corner. This is home now. As you step inside, faces turn toward you, some with sympathy, others with warning. There's Marcus, about your age, 2 years in, and his eyes already look like they've lived a lifetime too long. Alexios, older, his arms are scarred, and so is his soul. He leans in, whispering stories about the special guests and what entertainment really means in this house. And then there's Philemon, just 14, but the look on his face belongs to someone decades older. He was once the son of a merchant, until debt took everything. Everything, including him. 6 months here? And now he's the one explaining how things truly work. Philemon's voice is hollow, mechanical, like he's describing someone else's life. You've heard of symposiums, right? He asks. The grand gatherings, where the so-called intellectuals of Athens meet to discuss philosophy, politics, art. You nod. Of course. Everyone's heard the stories. These were supposed to be gatherings of the greatest minds. Elegant, sophisticated. Yeah, that's the version they write in history books. Philemon says deadpan. The truth, very, very different, he explains. During the day, the philosophers debate the nature of virtue, of justice, of democracy. But when the sun goes down and the wine starts flowing, those same men, those pillars of wisdom, demand other forms of entertainment. It's expected, normal even. The slaves don't just serve wine and carry food. No, they serve themselves. The same poets who write about honor and love? The same scholars who argue the ethics of war and governance? By night, they treat living, breathing people like playthings, disposable, replaceable, forgotten. Philemon describes the rituals like he's reading off a grocery list. First, they scrub you down, oil your skin, makes it shine under the lantern light, makes every flaw disappear. Then they dress you. Not real clothes, not for warmth, thin fabrics, sheer, draped in ways designed not to hide but to highlight. Sometimes, jewelry, a gold bracelet, A thin collar, decorative, not protective, meant to announce you're not a person, you're an accessory. The symposium starts, formally enough. Guests recline on cushioned couches arranged around the room. Discussions begin, serious ones. They debate the nature of the universe, of the soul, of democracy, of conquest, of whether Socrates' ideas on virtue apply to the individual or the collective. All while sipping wine poured by hands that don't have the right to refuse. But the tone shifts, slowly, predictably. As the amphorae empty, so do the masks of civility. Laughter grows louder. Conversations drift from philosophy to indulgence, from politics to pleasure. The men who pride themselves on intellectual mastery, they become something else entirely. Philemon leans closer. His voice drops to a whisper. You'll learn to read the shift, he says. You'll learn when the talk stops being about ideas and starts being about you. And in that moment, reality crashes over you like a tidal wave. This isn't a debate hall. This isn't a school of thought. It's a stage. And whether you like it or not, you've just been cast in the lead role. As the night stretches on and the wine does its work, the air shifts. What began as thoughtful debate unravels into hollow stories. Witty remarks decay into crude jokes, bravado replaces intellect, and then the attention turns. Suddenly, those of us who had been shadows, quiet hands pouring wine, serving food, become the centerpieces of the room. It starts small. A guest asks for more wine, but insists you pour it, not the others. Another waves you over, asks for a shoulder massage, while his fingers casually trace your wrist as you lean in. Feed me, another chuckles, pointing at the bowl of grapes. Right from your hand, individually, harmless, collectively, suffocating. You learn to read the shift, the way laughter softens as you pass, how conversations fracture when certain guests start following your movements, like predators circling. Then comes the first time you're chosen. Too naive to truly grasp what's happening. An older guest, someone old enough to be your grandfather, beckons you over with a smile too polished to trust. Sit, he says, patting the couch beside him. Join me for a drink. He asks about your homeland, your family, your memories. His voice, warm, friendly. At first, his hand lands on your shoulder, heavy, lingering. Then it starts to drift, down, further. You try to shift away, but his grip tightens. His smile never fades. Around you, the chatter dims. Conversations dissolve. Laughter turns, sharper, crueler. The guests aren't really watching each other anymore. They're watching you. What happens next etches itself into your memory with the cruel clarity that only trauma can carve. The way your protests are ignored, the way your discomfort is dismissed as entertainment. You realize, in this place, no one is coming to help. By the time you're dragged back to the cold stone cell below, you stare blankly at the ceiling. Your body aches. But the physical pain is nothing compared to the hollowed-out emptiness that spreads inside. You understand now, you're not a person here. You are a service, a function, a disposable form of entertainment for men who write poetry about the soul and crush it in the same breath. And this was only the beginning. In the months that follow, you learn the hard truth. What happened that first night? That was considered gentle by this house's standards. Some guests have preferences, specific tastes, cruel games, competitions over who can push a servant the furthest or break them the fastest. Demetrius, the overseer, doesn't just allow it, he encourages it. A broken servant is an obedient one. You come to understand the hierarchy here. A brutal ecosystem of exploitation. The newest, the freshest, suffer the worst. They are the ones offered up first to satisfy the hungriest appetites. Those who survive long enough might be promoted from entertainment stock to house servant, kitchen worker, personal attendant, jobs with fewer encounters. But surviving isn't enough. To climb the ladder, you must surrender fully. Not just your dignity, but your very concept of personhood. You must participate in your own dehumanization, and yet some still try to resist. Marcus tried to escape in his first month. They caught him before he reached the city gates. What followed was a beating so brutal he limped for weeks. The scars, permanent. Alexios refused a particular task, something degrading beyond words. His punishment, 3 days, chained outside in the courtyard, no food, no water, exposed to the elements, a living lesson for the rest of us. And still, as you lay there in your cell at night, listening to the muffled cries echoing through stone walls, You can't help but wonder, how much of yourself will be left when this is over? But resistance takes many forms. Some didn't fight with fists, but by retreating so deeply into themselves, they became hollow shells. Bodies without souls, breathing but barely alive. Others learned a desperate kind of cunning, studying moods, predicting tempers, doing just enough to dodge the worst punishments without ever truly submitting. And then there were the lucky ones, the ones who simply faded. Illness, injury, despair. For some, death wasn't a tragedy. It was an escape. You watched it happen. You saw servants stop eating, stop speaking, stop moving, stop caring whether they lived or died. And when they were gone, they were replaced. Quickly, easily. The markets never ran out of fresh bodies. The methods used to break people here were as sophisticated as they were brutal. Isolation. They cut you off from everything and everyone you ever knew. No language from home, no customs, no familiar faces, just others like you. Powerless, terrified, and while you might exchange glances of sympathy with the others, no one could save you. No one could protect you, not really. Unpredictability. That was another weapon. You never knew when you'd be summoned, or why, or what would be demanded of you, or how severe the punishment would be for the smallest mistake. That constant, gnawing uncertainty, it was a fear that lived under your skin. It never left. It broke you faster than any whip ever could. But maybe the most insidious weapon of all was erasure. They stripped away your name, gave you a new one, something easier for their tongues. They banned your language, your songs, your prayers. They dressed you in their clothes, fed you their food, forced you to bow to their gods. Piece by piece, they dismantled the person you were, until nothing remained but property. And the guests who visited this house? They were society's finest, wealthy merchants, high-ranking politicians, famous artists, revered philosophers, the very men whose names would be carved into history as builders of civilization. But within these marble walls, behind the polished columns, they removed the masks they wore in public and revealed desires that would horrify those who worshipped them centuries later. There was Dionysos, a celebrated statesman, known for fiery speeches about justice and civic virtue. On the assembly floor, he spoke of fairness, democracy, honor, but behind closed doors he reveled in humiliation, forcing servants into degrading spectacles, all while quoting poetry about the beauty of the human spirit. Then there was Cleenes, a merchant praised for his generosity, for funding public projects and feeding the poor. But that generosity masked something darker. In private, he indulged in cruelty, a believer that suffering was a lesson, that pain was a tool, to teach servants their place in the natural order. But perhaps the most disturbing of all was the philosopher, a renowned thinker, a man who wrote essays on virtue, discipline, and the pursuit of a good life. Publicly, he lectured about self-control, morality, the importance of balance. But after a few cups of wine, the mask shattered. What emerged was a monster, one who twisted logic and philosophy into weapons, crafting elaborate arguments to justify every cruelty, every violation, every act of domination. And none of them, none, saw themselves as hypocrites. In their minds, morality was reserved for equals, for fellow citizens, for free men. Slaves? Slaves were something other, a different moral category entirely. You could be generous to a neighbor and merciless to a servant without feeling an ounce of guilt, without a flicker of contradiction. This was the rot at the heart of their world. The same society that built breathtaking temples, composed immortal poetry, and debated the nature of the universe, also normalized the complete destruction of human identity, the reduction of people to tools, a culture of unimaginable beauty built on a foundation of unimaginable cruelty. And that is the truth history often forgets. None of it was accidental. The marble statues, the grand theaters, the endless debates about philosophy, virtue, and freedom, every single piece of it stood on the broken backs of those who were never free. As months bled into years, you learned to survive in ways your younger self couldn't even imagine. Survival became an art form. You learned to read the smallest signs, the subtle shift in a guest's voice, the twitch of a brow, the way a wine cup was set down just a little too hard. You learned which smiles meant danger and which silences meant worse. You mastered the act of vanishing without ever leaving, your body present, your mind somewhere else. A place deep enough, dark enough, that no hand, no voice, no cruelty could reach it. But every act of submission left a scar, not on your skin, on something deeper. Piece by piece, the boy who once laughed while running through olive groves faded. In his place stood a ghost, a hollow-eyed shadow who haunted his own body. The other slaves became the only family you had left, bound not by blood, but by shared suffering, shared nightmares, shared survival. You developed a silent language, glances, gestures, the barest nods to to comfort each other, without tipping off the overseers. You shared scraps of food. You took turns watching over each other during the rare hours of rest. Sometimes, you just held each other when the nightmares became too heavy to bear alone. But even those fragile bonds were poisoned, twisted by the system that trapped you. The promise of slightly better treatment could turn brother against brother. A single whispered lie to an overseer could buy someone a softer bed at the cost of someone else's suffering. Some nights, lying on that straw mat in the darkness, you tried to remember your mother's face. But it was fading, month after month, replaced by the faces of men who hurt you. You tried to remember your father's voice, but all you could hear were the drunken laughs of the guests and the screams of others like you. Your past became a dream, a half-remembered echo, while the nightmare you lived in stretched endlessly toward a future too terrifying to imagine. The abuse was relentless and varied. Some guests preferred psychological games, subtle domination that left no visible marks, but carved deep wounds into your mind. Others were more direct, fists, whips, brands of hot metal pressed into flesh, symbols of ownership burned into skin forever. Some found pleasure in inventing creative punishments, twisting pain and humiliation into something they considered entertainment. But perhaps the most soul-crushing was the sheer casualness of it. A man could pause in the middle of a philosophical debate to backhand a servant, not out of anger, not out of passion, just boredom. Another could interrupt the recitation of a poem to demand something unspeakable because he felt like it. The violence wasn't personal, it wasn't even emotional, it was procedural, routine, as ordinary as pouring wine or lighting a lamp. And so, you learned something no child should ever have to learn: how to treat your own body as something separate, something other, a vessel, a cage, a thing that happened to contain your consciousness but didn't truly belong to you. You developed the ability to float above yourself, to watch your own suffering from somewhere outside of it, detached, cold. It was survival, a defense mechanism, but it came with a cost. Piece by piece, you began to forget what it ever meant to be human, just as they intended, as the second year inside that house dragged on. Something changed, not just the scars on your body. No, this was deeper. Your voice sounded different now, softer, careful. The rough mountain accent that once marked you as someone free was gone. Your posture shifted too, shoulders hunched, eyes lowered. You moved like someone who had learned pain comes to those who are seen. But the most disturbing changes were in your mind. You caught yourself instinctively calculating the moods of anyone wearing clean clothes. Your body flinched at sudden sounds, and worst of all, you felt grateful. Grateful when a taskmaster merely ignored you instead of punishing you. Grateful for an extra piece of bread or a day without bruises. That's how deep the system sank its claws into you. This was its greatest success, not just forcing obedience through fear, but rewiring your mind until resistance didn't even feel like an option. The chains no longer needed to be around your wrists because they were wrapped around your thoughts. But even inside this perfectly engineered machine of dehumanization, sparks of resistance survived. Small, quiet, but real. The others, your brothers and sisters in captivity, they whispered stories of home when they could. Stories became acts of rebellion. Memory itself became defiance. They carved tiny sculptures from broken pottery and hid them in cracks in the walls. They hummed songs in languages the overseers couldn't understand. They recited poems, barely above a whisper, poems about who they were before. But the most powerful resistance was bearing witness. In stolen moments, behind closed doors, they shared names. Names of those who didn't survive. Names the world would otherwise erase. They spoke the truth of what was happening, truth that the outside world refused to see, truth that their oppressors tried desperately to bury. Bearing witness became survival, became protest, became the stubborn, unkillable flame of their humanity. Because the owners had a different story, a lie that said the slaves were happy, that they were cared for, that they were lucky to serve. A lie repeated so often, the world believed it, but not the ones living it. Yet resistance carried brutal risks. Speaking in your native tongue, punishable by mutilation. Comforting a fellow prisoner, you could be sold, separated, or worse, given to the cruelest hands the market had to offer. Even simple acts of kindness were crimes against the machine. And the house itself became a character in this nightmare. Its marble halls echoed with the ghosts of those who suffered here. Its flawless mosaic floors, its painted ceilings depicting gods and heroes, all of it hid what happened behind closed doors. Every night, the same walls that displayed scenes of beauty and triumph also contained unspeakable things. Art and horror, side by side. A civilization that praised wisdom, beauty, and virtue was built on the screams of the forgotten, and he realized the house wasn't just a place. It was a monument to everything they tried to pretend they weren't. And they were. Another gathering, quieter, more respectable. The guests were older this time, philosophers, statesmen, respected voices of Athens. They sat reclined, sipping wine, locked in heavy debate over the nature of justice and the ideal state. You served them drinks, invisible as furniture, as trained, their topic, whether virtue was something you were born with or could be taught. One man argued that some people were simply born for servitude, born with lesser souls, incapable of governing themselves. Another countered that character was shaped by circumstance, that even slaves could possess virtue if raised differently. The irony hit like a punch to the ribs. These were men who committed atrocities by night, who destroyed lives like yours, who shattered children like the boy you once were. And yet here they were debating virtue, talking about justice while creating living nightmares for those beneath them. They weren't ignorant barbarians, they were cultured monsters. Monsters who quoted Socrates while perfecting cruelty. Monsters who wrote essays on honor while inflicting horror. And it dawned on you, a terrible, cold realization. The system wasn't born from ignorance. It wasn't the byproduct of primitive minds. It was the result of deliberate choices, made by men fully capable of understanding right from wrong. They chose this. They chose this. The paintings, the marble statues, the poetry, the grand debates about democracy and enlightenment. None of it was progress. None of it was morality. It was just decoration, a mask for the same bottomless cruelty humanity had always carried. Years blurred into each other inside that clarity of despair. You perfected the art of being unseen, moving like a ghost through the halls, occasionally summoned, often ignored. You watched as new captives arrived and broke. Watched the cycle of suffering turn again and again, never changing. Watched the endless parade of respected citizens, men whose names would be recorded in history as heroes, thinkers, pioneers, tear off their public masks and reveal the darkness beneath. And somewhere deep inside, something waited, something that refused to die completely. Some nights, you found yourself standing by that tiny window, staring up at the same stars you once gazed at from the rooftop of your family's home. You wondered, are they still alive? Do they ever think about the sun they traded to survive? You imagined your siblings, older now, perhaps with children of their own, whispering stories about the brother who vanished when they were young. But those thoughts didn't hurt anymore. They felt distant, like an old song from another lifetime. Haunting, beautiful, but no longer part of the world you lived in. You learned how to hold those memories without letting them consume you. A kind of meditation, a way to exist between remembering and forgetting. By now, maybe you were 25, though age meant little in a place where time was measured not by seasons, but by suffering. Your body carried the map of that suffering. Scars that never fully healed, joints that ached with the ghosts of old injuries, a cough deep in your chest whispering that something inside was failing. More importantly, you were becoming obsolete. The guests who once fought for your service now barely noticed you. Fresh faces had arrived, young, unbroken, with that spark of defiance that made submission look entertaining. You were becoming invisible, not the kind of invisible that protected you, but the kind that meant forgotten, discarded. One morning, Demetrius summoned you. His tone was flat, businesslike. He informed you that you were being sold to a mining camp up in the mountains. It wasn't punishment, it wasn't reward, it was just economics. The cost of keeping you had finally outweighed your value as entertainment. The mines, everyone knew what that meant. It wasn't an execution, not officially, but it may as well have been. No one lasted long there. Months, maybe weeks. Work that broke the strongest bodies. Air that destroyed lungs. Life expectancy measured in suffering, not in years. You received the news with the same hollow emptiness that had become your entire existence. Whether death came in the form of a body still breathing or a body finally collapsing, did it even matter? You had already died 1,000 small deaths long before this. But then, something unexpected happened. Marcus, the boy who arrived the same day you did, somehow, against every odd, he survived. More than survived, he adapted, became a personal attendant to Lysander's wife, a position with softer hands, fewer punishments, and regular meals. That final night he slipped into your cell. Said nothing, just pressed something into your palm. Cold, rough, a shard of metal, crude but sharp, a tool, or a weapon, or both. Both. No words were needed. His eyes said everything. You have a choice now. A choice about how your story would end, or maybe if it would end at all. That night, everything came down to a choice. As you held that jagged piece of metal in your hand, 1,000 possibilities played through your mind. Escape, revenge, release. Each one whispered promises and threats. Run and maybe taste freedom, even if just for a moment, before the dogs, the chains, or the blades caught up. Fight and deliver, however briefly, a sliver of the pain the world had carved into your bones. Or take control of the one thing they could never fully own. Your ending, on your terms. But as the first pale light of dawn crept through the cracks of that filthy wall, you made a different choice. You hid it, left it tucked where another pair of desperate hands might one day find it. A message passed forward, the same one Marcus had handed to you. You still have a choice. Your story wasn't ending tonight, but whether it would end in fire, in freedom, or in the quiet fading of breath, that was no longer the point. What mattered was that someone, someday, might write a different ending. The road to the mines snaked through landscapes that stirred memories you thought were long dead. Mountain trails that once carried your childhood laughter. Streams where your hands had snatched slippery fish. Villages that might still hold faces, family, whose names you barely dared remember. But there was no running. The shackles made sure of that. And the guards? Seasoned. Merciless. Escape wasn't just unlikely, it was designed to be impossible. So instead, you did something else. You watched, you breathed it all in, the wind in the pines, the scent of wildflowers, the cry of eagles circling far above. Not as a prisoner, but as someone saying goodbye to the world that once belonged to him. The mines were worse than the stories, worse than any nightmare. Crumbling tunnels, air so thick with dust it shredded your lungs. Days blurred into a haze of agony. No one survived long here, but that wasn't the point, because even in this place, even here, humanity found a way. The others, they'd built something, a hidden world beneath the cruelty, a network of whispered languages, shared food, stolen moments of rest. They told stories, not of pain but of life before, names of parents, of villages, songs in tongues their captors could never decipher. They remembered. And your story, it became part of that memory. The boy from the mountains, the child sold for a debt, the shadow who survived longer than anyone expected, not because he was stronger, but because he refused to forget who he once was. And when the end came, it didn't come with screams or fire. Just silence, a cough that wouldn't stop, a tunnel that gave way, a body that had carried more suffering than any should. But you didn't die alone. And more importantly, you didn't die forgotten. Those around you promised your name would be spoken, your story would be told, passed from mouth to mouth in the shadows, in the dark corners where power never looks. And maybe that's the point. These stories, they don't end. They echo through generations. A reminder whispered through time that behind every marble statue, every theater, every grand monument of the ancient world, there were hands that bled, backs that broke, lives that were traded away. The same civilization that gave us democracy, philosophy, and art also built itself on the bones of the unseen.